Good afternoon. Welcome back from lunch, everyone. I'm Ryan Overton with Navarro, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Aaron Deckard. Can't imagine there's a person in this room that doesn't already know Aaron. He exemplifies this year's theme, Partnering for Progress, as the tip of the spear from the acquisition process all the way through to partnering with the contractors. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say that we are grateful for Aaron's leadership and looking forward to hearing the acquisition updates today. Aaron Deckard is the Procurement Director at the DOE Environmental Management Consolidated Business Center in Cincinnati, Ohio. Aaron leads the EMCBC Office of Contracting to acquire, manage, and direct the procurement of supplies and services needed to support the EM mission, including major contracts to further DOE-EM environmental cleanup efforts. Aaron holds an undergraduate business degree from the University of Cincinnati and an MBA from Xavier University. Aaron?
Thank you. Appreciate it. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Good afternoon. Hopefully you all are having a great week this week. It's been a wonderful week of engagement this week at the 10th Cleanup Workshop. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Just a little bit more about me very briefly. Work at EMCBC, lead a fantastic procurement team at EMCBC. We are responsible for the major source selections across the EM complex, as well as administration of a number of contracts across headquarters, CBC, and the sites that we service, as well as targeted support for some of the larger EM sites, as well as non-EM customers, such as naval reactors and legacy management. And EM also certainly has a talented cadre of acquisition professionals across the respective larger sites as well. It's an honor to present information today and really to provide an acquisition update, as well as share a little bit in terms of where we're at in terms of small business outreach and procurement equity. I would echo Ryan's thoughts. I really appreciate the theme for this week, Partnering for Progress, as that's very emblematic as well of where we're at on the procurement side. So first I'll touch a little bit on the acquisition and program management framework, which really is critical to ensure that the procurement function is working to maintain the EM program's positive momentum in meeting the mission. EM deploys a continuum to navigate through the life cycle paradigm of the oversight model from acquisition, the initial stage of the acquisition and the acquisition planning phase, all the way through contract performance. Certainly on the front end begins with key elements, including requirements definition, contract type through a best value selection process. Many of these items I'll touch on a little bit further in terms of where we're at as it relates to our pivot a handful of years ago to the IDIQ approach toward cleanup and closure requirements. We also have a number of other requirements we're putting out that would not fall under the end state or the IDIQ approach. After award, we have certainly an enhanced focus on strong partnerships, no doubt, along with effective change control management to ensure connectivity between us and our prime contractor all the way through contract performance. We need to ensure steady progress on the contract, minimize contract changes, those types of things. And then the final piece I'll mention is effective establishment of PEMPs or other award or incentive fee criteria to set the right incentives and then measure performance through the contract administration phase. So from a holistic standpoint, number of ways to do business with EM, including prime contracts, subcontracts, and a number of other opportunities, including financial assistance. So first, prime contracts, wide variety, and a lot of this I recognize many of you folks are aware on the prime contract side, wide variety of prime contracts, number of small business set-asides, all the way from large multi-billion-dollar cleanup contracts down to simplified acquisitions and everything in between. From a subcontracting standpoint, very critical aspect of doing business with EM, not only have teaming subcontractors pre-award through the competitive process, but also significant opportunities post-award for subcontracting, particularly under the larger cleanup and closure type requirements. And third, other opportunities. So just touch briefly on a number of other opportunities or ways to do business with EM. Some of these are in the strategic sourcing category, including SCMC or Supply Chain Management Center, as well as ICPT or Integrated Contractor Purchasing Team. Those are key strategic sourcing tools that our prime contractors utilize in terms of subcontracting to support the mission at the various sites. EM is also very supportive of the Mentor-Protege program. Our prime contracts require 2 Mentor-Protege agreements during the course of performance. We recognize both the DOE program and the SBA program. The key is certainly supportive of the Mentor-Protege program. Additionally, greater use of IDIQs on a couple different levels. We have IDIQs in place now, a large business and a corresponding small business DD&R vehicle. Those are multiple award IDIQ vehicles that we'll use on a targeted basis for support, not only across our complex, but also to support work across other elements of the department. And we also have, I want to mention specifically, we have IDIQs, or an IDIQ vehicle in place for waste disposal, and we also have a treatment, and it's not a contract, but it's a BOA, in place with 5 BOA holders for waste treatment. And those, all of these vehicles I mentioned in particular are available for anyone that would like to see them on our EMCBC website. Also, GSA schedules for major requirements. We don't often use GSA schedules, I'll say, but we do where it makes sense to do so. I'd specifically mention we have an Oak Ridge Technical Management Administrative requirement on the street right now. It's a GSA buy. What's notable about that is that it's a woman-owned small business set-aside, which is very significant for procurement equity reasons. And I'll also mention financial assistance. So significant growth in the area of financial assistance recently. We had specifically two congressionally directed competitive grant programs that we've worked over the last couple of years. One is the Minority Serving Institution Partnership Program, FOA process. Back in March, we awarded $24 million in competitive grants to 7 MSIs. Just last week, awarded a follow-on. It used to be referred to as a FO, or a Funding Opportunity Announcement. The new term is a Notice of Funding Opportunity. NOFO is the new term. Issued last week for an additional $15 million in competitive MSI grants, as well as the Community Capacity Building Grant Program put an announcement out last week for $18 million in grant awards to 12 disadvantaged communities across our complex. So significant growth in the area of not just financial assistance, but really competitive financial assistance processes. As well as I think Candace mentioned yesterday, again, this is not a contract, more so on the lease side, but the Clean Up to Clean Energy initiative has provided opportunities for clean and renewable energy projects across our complex. So more specifically, I'll provide a brief snapshot of current major opportunities across the portfolio. From a strategic standpoint, wide variety of opportunities, either ongoing or upcoming in the areas of cleanup, infrastructure, support services, waste treatment and transportation, and more. As you can see on the slide, many of these opportunities will be set aside for small business, not all, but many. In terms of active procurements, most recently on the left-hand column, we did award the PPPO Technical Support Services contract last Thursday. We also have 6 other active procurements ongoing across headquarters and the EM sites. In terms of looking forward in upcoming acquisitions, so what's shown on the right piece of the slide is what I'll say is the contracts based on the expiration date of the current contracts. These are the requirements that we're looking at beginning our acquisition planning by FY26. And again, based on the expiration date of the current contracts, whether that's option periods or an ordering period under an IDIQ, in terms of the ability for us to issue an order going out to a particular year. So more specifically, Portsmouth infrastructure is one to mention. I'll touch on that a little bit later. We announced last week in a quarterly RFP projection that we're looking at a draft RFP in the next spring timeframe. We're also beginning to look at market research for the Los Alamos Legacy recompete or Los Alamos Legacy cleanup contract requirement, issued an RFI this summer. And additionally, we're projecting requirements, as you can see, across a number of the EM sites, as well as some non-EM requirements. I mentioned earlier that my office is responsible for awarding or for administering and then handling the next award for the Legacy Management Support Services contract. For example, that contract has the ability to issue orders through or into 2028, I should say. Hence, we would start our acquisition planning by the FY26 timeframe. So that'll give you a feel for some of the requirements we're looking at in terms of beginning acquisition planning within the next couple of years. I would mention from an information availability standpoint, we maintain a current acquisitions page on our CBC website. There's a dedicated procurement website for each requirement or each competition, and that's really your best place to stay up to speed in terms of the most recent updates for each particular acquisition or the RFP and so forth. So as I mentioned previously, we're proud to now have multiple DD&R contract vehicles in place as a mission-enabling tool. We have a small business DD&R vehicle as well as a large business DD&R vehicle in place. In total, 23 vendors, 9 on the large, 14 on the small, to allow us to meet the needs not only of EM, but also other program offices, including NNSA, Naval Reactors, and Science. Of particular note, the first task order awarded was Building 251 at the Livermore site. The performance is certainly progressing. Happy to report that approximately 60% of the building has been demolished to date, so success there. Most recent award was earlier this summer, end of June timeframe, awarded a task order for demolition of excess facilities and ancillary structures at 3 East Coast Naval Reactor sites. At the Knowles, Kessering, and Bettis sites, that contract is off to a strong start, strong partnership with the contractor, and that contract is focused on the pre-2035 work across those 3 sites in an integrated manner. So our goal is really to use these contracting vehicles not only for potential surge work capacity within the EM portfolio, but also for these potential requirements that are coming to EM from our partner organizations within the department. One thing we're looking at closely, and we've conveyed this to the contract holders, is that we are looking at doing as good as we possibly can in terms of forecasting the requirements coming out under these DD&R vehicles. It is more challenging, I'll say, to forecast under the DD&R vehicles than it is for our regular ongoing continuing requirements. It's an action we're pursuing, and as soon as we can build those forecasts in a credible manner as the requirements come over to EM, we'll convey those to that information to those contract holders as soon as we can. So fostering relationships and strong partnerships is critical to ensure that we're meeting the mission in procurement, which is no different than any other area of the EM program. So specifically, we've worked we've worked diligently to enhance our strategic communication with our partners, including engagement, listening sessions with both our large and our small business industry partners, and that's really been critical to ensuring that we maintain a strong procurement function. We certainly have a strong preference for competition and inclusion, as well as a desire to grow our industry base, as well as maintaining the relationships with the partners that we currently have. One area I would specifically mention, and this is something we heard in our first Reverse Industry Day that we held last spring, May of 2023, specifically requests for information. So for any major EM requirements, our first step is to issue an RFI or a request for information. Those are generally issued out of EMCBC in Cincinnati, and our commitment to industry is that we're going to leave those RFIs on the street for at least 21 business days. We made that commitment after the first Reverse Industry Day, and we'll continue to carry that forward. And what that allows us to do is it allows for transparency and inclusion to the maximum extent practicable. So for any of these upcoming requirements, the key is to look for the RFI coming out first. I would say from a continuous improvement standpoint, we conduct comprehensive lessons learned processes at the conclusion of each procurement. Internally, as well as through the debriefing process, we're receiving feedback from industry. So I would confirm to you that we take that information to heart and build that into our processes from an improvement standpoint. And finally, I alluded to earlier, we began March 2020 posting quarterly updates of upcoming RFPs. We just posted the last update last Thursday. That is something we will continue to do. And in fact, the last update we initially from 2020 until last week, we were posting final RFPs. Last week's update, we also included draft RFPs, and we'll continue to do that forward. So as many of you are aware, end state contracting launched in 2018. Really what it means is, the term is end state contracting. What it really means from a practical standpoint is greater utilization of IDIQs for cleanup and closure type requirements. Going back, the stated goal was to reinvigorate the nuclear waste cleanup mindset. How do we do that? Through better work scope definition, reliable pricing, risk-informed technical approaches through task orders under IDIQ contracts. Goal is to reduce our environmental risk and our financial liability. So as was conceived, a number of desired outcomes, those were captured in our end state contracting model program plan, public document issued October 2020. We're still at Rev 0. There have not been any updates, and there's been a high level of consistency across the RFPs. And really the reality is it was not only EM, but at the time our industry partners were finding it increasingly difficult to price out scope for up to 10 years on highly complex nuclear cleanup work from an efficiency standpoint and from a risk standpoint. So in looking at the end state or the IDIQ model from a fundamental procurement standpoint, IDIQ vehicle, ordering period up to 10 years, ability to issue an order for 5 additional years. So it's a potential partnership for up to 15 years total, assuming performance remains strong. What that allows is for a high level of stability long-term for our sites, for our contractors, for our workforces, and for our communities. Two-step process. So first step, best value competition, award an IDIQ contract, moves to post-award, negotiating task orders bilaterally with the contractor. And really, when we built the model was really built on the fundamental tenets of our key successes, including, but certainly not limited to, Rocky and Fernald. We brought a lot of folks in that were involved in those contracts, helped us build the path forward. All right, so overall, there is a recognition, though, I'll say that the IDIQ approach represents a paradigm shift in the way we do business. However, it's been successful, I'll say, in meeting the cleanup mission. So I mentioned the end state program plan. You can see a snapshot on this slide. Again, issued October 2020, public document, clear preference for using the IDIQ model for cleanup and closure type requirements. Specifically, there have been a number of positive outcomes. One is consistency. There's a high level of consistency from one RFP to the next across the sites. A lot of repeatability and predictability in our process internally as we're putting out the RFPs, as well as for industry as you're responding to the RFPs. Partnerships is critical. That's one of the key tenets of the model. There's a consistent partnering clause in Section H, and that has been a key contributor to success under the end state contracts post-award. And innovation as well, I would certainly mention, can be a factor pre-award. We've gone as far as specifically writing language into the PWS or into Section C, where we also expect to see innovation post-award, whether that's new ideas, new companies, new processes, so forth. So a lot of words to explain what we've realized, but practically speaking, these contracts are hard. These are highly complex, first-of-a-kind nuclear cleanup requirements that we're talking about. And really, the game started. We're still early in the game, but we're really seeing successes across the site. So a few specific examples. Idaho, we have an integrated task order strategy in place. It's allowed us to advance the mission on the EM side as well as on the NR side in terms of the NRF D&D work. Savannah River, and I think Mike Budney alluded to this yesterday, got in one-year task order, gained runtime with our new contractor, including SWPF operations, hot ops. Then we pivoted to longer-term task orders that are going to drive innovative strategies. It's a delivery-focused fee curve, keeps us on track to complete the liquid waste mission by 2037. Oak Ridge carrying forward post-ETTP into the next phase of the cleanup. Nevada, it's really allowed us to pivot into the D&D work, in particular with Test Cell C and EMAD. And then Moab as well. Moab is tracking forward into I believe our 5th task order now, which is a pile completion task order. That allows us to pivot to the next task order, which will be the closure task order, where we're already partnering with the local community in terms of what the end state looks like and what closure looks like. So I would share, those are a couple of examples. The IDIQ vehicle is allowing us to move the mission forward. It's driving the needed partnerships, the needed innovation, as well as the flexibility to advance the mission. A couple notes, would recognize there was a GAO report that came out a couple of years ago on end state contracting. We've maintained a close relationship with GAO. In fact, GAO joined us this spring in an end state workshop. Very collaborative discussion. It was very helpful. I've had the great opportunity to directly participate in the partnering sessions across multiple sites. And I can attest there is a culture shift, and I believe it's happening, and I've seen it happen. I'd be remiss, I've mentioned I do recognize the article that was written in the ECA bulletin. Certainly happy to have engagements with ECA or whatever community partner would make sense to just make sure we're really not talking past each other and making sure we're making the right decisions to advance the mission. So next, in my last few minutes, I'll touch really on the critically important topic of procurement equity. This is something we have truly embraced. So in short, increased focus on small disadvantaged business opportunities, increased focus on expanding the supplier base, and most notably, an increased focus on outreach, engagement, and inclusion. Really, we take our small business first policy to heart, and we follow the rule of two. We're making every effort to set aside requirements for small business or socioeconomic business where we can. If not, the prime contract will have significant requirements for small business subcontracting. So just a little further specifics to put a little more meat on the bone in terms of what the subcontracting requirements are. These are items, and I won't dwell on these items. We've been very consistent with including these items over the last really 5 years, almost a decade. So a consistent subcontracted work clause in Section H, all of our major contracts, specific, and not just a percentage, but really a hard dollar value now going to small business, requirements for meaningful work for small business, as well as specific goals for socioeconomic categories, small business fee reduction clause in Section B. If a requirement's not set aside, small business participation will be part of the competitive evaluation process. Made clear our position on named teaming subs equals consent. I mentioned 2 mentor proteges required through our major prime contracts. So what does this mean? So it's really significant opportunities for small business inclusion on the front end, if it's a small business set aside, or if it's not, even if it's not as a teaming subcontractor or potentially part of the LLC, and certainly post-award through the remainder of the procurement cycle. Not on the slide. The other thing I would mention, though, from a community perspective, I would want to be as clear as I can. We've been very consistent in our community commitment clause and Section H of all of our contracts. So very consistent there, and you know, that's that consistency has gone back a long time, at least a decade. Final item I want to share is we are sincerely interested in input from our partners and our stakeholders. And this comes in a lot of different forms. We've worked hard to expand our engagement, our outreach, and our partnerships. A couple specific items I would mention. We partnered with the waste management team this past year, launched a matchmaking session Thursday. On the Thursday of this past March waste management session, we're already working with Gary and his team, and we will have a matchmaking session again at next year's waste management event. Also, the Atiba Small Business Thursday initiative, something we launched two falls ago with Elizabeth Harm and the Atiba team. It's been a wonderful partnership. We'll continue on into our third year this year. That'll include engagement opportunities, panel sessions, matchmaking. And the one thing I'll mention in particular for this year is we'll have a small business focused reverse industry day as part of next month's Small Business Thursday at the Atiba event. And that'll be our second reverse industry day. We held our first, it was a virtual event in May of 2023. So it was the first reverse industry day that EM has held. I will tell you, we learned, we listened, and it was beneficial. So we certainly had some takeaways that we took that we built into our practices, and we're looking forward to the feedback that we'll receive during next month's Small Business Focused Reverse Industry Day. So in closing, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to engage. That's all I have, and I will defer to Ryan to see if we have time for any questions.
We do have just a few minutes left for questions, and I'm sure we have some, so take advantage of this.
Okay, is this on? Is it on? Hi. Just a question. So Nevada and Moab in-state contracts were small business set-asides. So going forward on some of the future sites and scopes, are you looking at, or have you looked at any of those that could qualify as a small business set-aside? In-state IDIQ, what you're terming it now, to be small business set-aside. If not, what criteria, could you explain the criteria that you're going to use in establishing, the rationale on it not going small business?
Great question. Those decisions are, to peel the curtain back a little bit, those decisions are made through the acquisition planning or the market research process. Generally, we issue an RFI and conduct a comprehensive market research and acquisition planning process. It really comes down to rule of two. That's the law, that's the regs. If there are two or more capable small business to perform the work, then it would generally be set aside. In terms of end state requirements, I didn't have a slide up, but I had a slide at Waste Management. If you lay the requirements out and look across the complex, we have, I'll say nine total end state contracts that have already been identified, if you include West Valley, that's currently under evaluation. If you look at our, across the sites, that would leave two sites that would logically fall under the IDIQ end state model. That's Los Alamos and that's Paducah. We issued the RFI this summer for Los Alamos. That contract with all the options could go as long as April of 2028. It had a slide, Paducah deactivation and remediation. That would be the other logical, I'll say, end state contract. If, assuming that the end state contract program plan, continues as is, that contract with options can go through, I believe, May or June of 2027. So that's the other requirement we'll be looking at in the next couple of years. Thanks, good question.
I think that concludes our time, so let's thank Aaron.
If the next panel could come right up.